In our typical production process that starts with increasing returns to scale but eventually turns to decreasing returns to scale, we've recognized the possibility of a corner solution, that is to say, the possibility that the best a producer can do is to produce nothing. But there's another type of corner solution that's possible for a different type of production process. This production process is one that has increasing returns to scale throughout, and the new possible corner solution is that the producer will choose to produce an infinite amount. I realize this sounds absurd, and it is absurd, but it merely demonstrates that price-taking producers can actually never have production processes that always have increasing returns to scale. Increasing returns to scale means that it's getting easier and easier to produce the more we're producing, which implies that the average cost of producing must be falling throughout. It can't be rising, because if it did ever rise, this would imply that we had entered a part of the production process that has decreasing returns to scale. Thus, the average cost curve is falling and converging to some level. The only way the average cost curve can be falling is if the marginal cost curve lies below the average cost. And the only way that the production process can have increasing returns to scale throughout is if the marginal cost also declines throughout. Therefore, we get a marginal cost curve that lies below the average cost and also converges to some level. The total cost incurred by the producer is the sum of all the marginal costs, so the total cost is the area underneath the marginal cost curve at whatever output level the producer chooses. Suppose that P star is the level to which the marginal cost and average cost curves converge as output gets large. In other words, as output approaches infinity, marginal cost and average cost get closer and closer to P star without ever quite reaching it. Suppose then that the producer produces some positive amount. This implies that she'll incur a total cost that's equal to the shaded blue area up to that amount. But the total revenues that she collects will be P star times that output level. In other words, a rectangle that's smaller than the shaded blue area that represents her costs. For any positive output level, she'll therefore earn a negative profit. For any price at P star or below, the total revenue earned by the producer for producing any positive quantity will therefore lie below the total cost she incurs. The profit maximizing action is therefore to produce nothing, in other words, to end up at a corner solution where the firm simply closes its doors. Suppose the price rises above P star, then we know it will eventually cross the average cost curve which converges to P star. At the point where it crosses the average cost curve, price is equal to average cost, which means profit is equal to zero. For any output quantity above that, profit will be positive, because price will lie above marginal cost for all quantities above the zero profit quantity. Thus, the firm can keep earning additional profit by producing more and more, and the optimal course of action is to produce an infinite amount. If a price-taking firm actually had increasing returns to scale throughout, it would therefore produce either zero or an infinite amount depending on whether the price was above or below P star. Now, it doesn't make much sense to think of a firm as producing an infinite amount in a finite world. The reason it doesn't make much sense is because it doesn't make much sense to assume that price-taking firms ever have increasing returns to scale throughout. If a firm did have increasing returns to scale throughout, it would have marginal costs that continue to fall throughout, and thus it could presumably take over the entire market and would no longer be a price-taking firm, because it would now be the only firm. In fact, when we get to chapter 23, where we talk about monopolies, we'll talk about the case of a natural monopoly that has a marginal cost curve that declines throughout. Price-taking firms must therefore eventually have decreasing returns to scale, which implies they have average cost and marginal cost curves that eventually slope up, and supply curves that are composed of the segment of the marginal cost curve that lies above average cost.